Coming to you from beautiful Vancouver, Canada, this is Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here's your host, Mark Daly.
Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One racing. My name is Mark Daly, I'm your host, and as always I'm joined by Kevin Laramie, and we're sitting here in the afterglow of the Spanish Grand Prix, and I don't even know where to start to talk about this one. Do we talk about Mercedes and Hamilton and Rosberg? Do we talk about Ferrari just not seizing the opportunity? Do we talk about Max Verstappen and the youngest driver ever to lead a Grand Prix and win a Grand Prix? Or do we talk about the very sad figure of Danny Kvyat that's been demoted and who said that he probably would have won that race if he hadn't been kicked out of Red Bull? So, Kevin, where do we start?
Isn't it the worst possible scenario if you're Danny Kvyat in this race? You might have been in the winning driver's seat. You could have been, but no, you were too hot-headed a couple weeks before and you were demoted. And yeah, it's like a kick in the face the Red Bull gave to him. Or more importantly, it's Max Verstappen's day, the youngest ever driver. I think it's worth noting that what a race for him. Like the way that he handled his tires that were like due to explode 3 laps before the race finish. It's so impressive to me. Yes, he didn't necessarily go for broke in that race. And if you look at Danny Ricciardo's post-race comments, he mentions like he tried to overtake, which is true. Not necessarily the case for Verstappen, but at the end of the day, Verstappen, the right strategy mixed with a car that was fast, and he was able to get the most out of his car and the most reliability and consistency for an 18-year-old. That's crazy. What were you doing when you were 18? I wasn't winning Grand Prix.
No, it wasn't winning Grand Prix. And I was just wondering if Max was even old enough to drink the champagne that he was spraying off of the podium there on Sunday afternoon. But he had a pretty good qualifying. Obviously, he got onto the second row in P4 next to his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. And then it was the Ferraris behind them because what we expected, the Mercedes dominance, obviously into the first corner. We saw Nico Rosberg make a pretty aggressive move, a pretty bold move to get in front of his teammate Lewis Hamilton. But a couple of corners later, it was all over. Not only was Rosberg out of the race, but Hamilton was out of the race. And the interesting thing is that they both took each other out in quite a shocking own goal, if you want to call it that.
No, it was a crazy situation. It was probably the best thing for F1 and for the Spain Grand Prix itself, because if there's a track in a Grand Prix where if there's a dominating car and nobody can catch them, it's a procession. It would have been this one. But the fact that Rosberg took Hamilton or Hamilton took Rosberg out, depending on your perception, the fact that both Mercedes was out after turn 3 gave this race the energy and the open feeling. Because, it was never really open. Like, Manor was not going to win that race. The Mercedes was there or not, But for a certain amount of teams, like Red Bull, like Ferrari, and maybe on the outside of that, Williams, it was open. And Red Bull won on that day with strategy. You could tell that Ferrari was there. It was close, second and third. They were really close, but they didn't capitalize. And that's maybe the one storyline coming out of Ferrari this year. In the opportunity they presented themselves in Australia and this weekend in Spain, they had opportunities there and they didn't capitalize on the winning side of things.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme, isn't it? As you say, we've seen it several times over the season so far through the previous 4 races and again on this past weekend. And it's very interesting because I think Vettel said that if it wasn't for the fact that the two Mercedes took each other out on the opening lap, that they wouldn't have done as well as they did. Obviously, Raikkonen and Vettel both got on the podium behind Max Verstappen, but I think that they weren't as good as the Red Bulls, and I think that obviously for Sebastian Vettel, that he was very fortunate that Ricardo had a puncture a couple of laps. Well, no, I guess it was on the penultimate lap when he had the puncture, because he was lucky enough to limp back into the pits and get that left rear tire changed, and then he still managed to get out and just to finish in front of Valtteri Bottas in the Williams.
By 2 seconds, and he was up by 47 before that.
That's right. I mean, talk about cutting it close. But he did have a couple good tries there on trying to pass Sebastian Vettel into the first corner there. But he wasn't able to actually make it stick. And then all of a sudden he started slowing down, and then he sort of pulled off to the one side of the track on the back of the circuit there. And I thought, oh no, he's had a mechanical failure. He's going to pull over. Then it was a puncture, which is a shame. I mean, he did get that P4, but he could have been on the podium there. And I think that's a bit of a surprise. And I think that we've seen, though, over the opening 5 races, that the Red Bull and that Tag Heuer branded Renault engine is actually a lot better than a lot of people expected. Maybe perhaps even Red Bull themselves. But I don't think that Max Verstappen particularly cares, because he had the best car on the day. They had the best strategy, and he managed the car and the tires well.
Yeah, and that's without the advance in the engine that's coming for not Monaco, but for Montreal. So that's going to be even more interesting. If you're looking at the tests that are doing midweek, so today and yesterday in Spain, Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel were the 2 fastest drivers today, with Romain Grosjean, the fourth best time today, with a brand new chassis tested by a Haas, because Romain Grosjean was complaining that his car was undrivable in the weekend and was unable to get anything out of this car, and there's a DNF, and it was the brakes at the end of the day. But today in Spain, in the testing, encouraging results for Haas, and a confirmation of the result for the Red Bull of Max Verstappen with the best time like Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari. So that's interesting. They'll be in front of Mercedes. Yes, everybody's testing differently, and there's games being played, but it bodes well for the future, because if you're looking at the actual difference between the Red Bulls and Mercedes, not McLaren, because there's a huge difference there. But,
Yeah, there is.
But McLaren and Red Bull, it used to be a 1.5 second. Now it might be 0.6. So it's getting close now.
And it's also interesting. I think it was after the Chinese Grand Prix, or maybe after Russia, that there was talk that the problems that Mercedes had been having with some of their different components failing, like Hamilton had the problem with the water pump in Russia, and Nico Rosberg also had an issue, and of course Hamilton had also some different failures in different races as well. And they were just saying that Ferrari is closer to Mercedes, but Mercedes is really pushing and just really has everything turned up almost to the max just to stay ahead of Ferrari. And maybe that's what they have, is that when they're pushing the envelope, that they still have that extra bit of performance, that extra bit of power that still just keeps them ahead of Ferrari. And it's too bad that they actually did take each other out in that opening lap. But when you do look at it from a broader or maybe a wider perspective, that it was a good thing that there was no Mercedes in the race, because likely they would have dominated it, and without them there, it was really good to see the other drivers fighting for position and seeing everything. And I thought it was so impressive. Obviously, if you're an 18-year-old Grand Prix driver, it's impressive you're in Formula One to begin with. But
anything you're doing is impressive at that stage.
Exactly. But another thing that impressed me, one of the things that impressed me about Max Verstappen was how he managed to stay in front of Kimi Räikkönen, who is a world champion, and he's a very good driver, and he was only half a second behind him most of the time, just pushing him, and how calm he looked, and how he didn't get too nervy and maybe lock up going into a corner, or just maybe not drive the car properly and just and ruin his tires. And he was just calm, collected, and it was just absolutely amazing to see a kid, literally a kid, take on a world champion who raced against his dad back in the day.
Yeah, and he mentioned it. Kimi Räikkönen mentioned it to Max Verstappen in the driver's room after the race. Like, I raced against your dad. Well, I beat your dad many, many times, and now you beat me in your first race with Red Bull.
Yeah, no, that was very impressive. But
Just go back, Mark, to your comment about Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi Räikkönen is known to be the type of driver that's going to be behind you, stalking you, not going to do anything crazy, but push you for that one little mistake. And it never came. And Kimi Räikkönen mentioned later on in the post-race comments about how he was getting close to Max Verstappen here and there. But when he was getting too close, he was losing downforce because of the slipstream effect, and he wasn't able to get closer to them. So whenever he got to inside half a second to Verstappen, he was going back to half a second because of that losing of the downforce effect. When he got closer, he was never able to close that gap and actually pose any threat to Max Verstappen. Not once did Kimi Räikkönen even try to overtake a Max Verstappen, even though he was right there, right in sight. But that little half a second distance could never be caught.
yeah, and he did kind of look, there was a couple of times going into the first corner that he might be thinking about making a move on Verstappen, but he never quite got as close to Verstappen to actually make a move as Daniel Ricciardo did on Sebastian Vettel, and obviously he couldn't make that stick, but he just couldn't get quite close enough, and it was very surprising to me, and I thought that the Ferrari might have a little bit more, but I think that just in general, that win by Max Verstappen was that feel-good story that Formula One needed, because if he hadn't won that race, if it was perhaps any other driver in the field, then still everybody would be talking about the incident between Hamilton and Rosberg and what it's going to do with the relationship and how it's going to affect them on the track in the next race at Monaco, and just whether or not they get along. Is it a toxic relationship, and what's happening in the team, and are they going to be back next year, and all these different things that come into play. So it was actually
all the things that we're going to talk about in a second.
Well, all the things we're going to talk about in a second, of course, and probably in 2 weeks and from now and 2 weeks after that. But at least for this very brief time, it was nice to not be focusing on Rosberg and Hamilton for once.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, Mark, because if you look at the race, the way it unfolded, Danny Ricciardo should have won that race.
Yeah, he could have.
Yeah, well, he was in front, and with bad strategy, they decided to do the 3 pit stop instead of the 2, where clearly it was a mistake as soon as they decided to do it, but it's already too late when you pit it there. And the way he explained it post-race, like, yeah, we actually got outpitted, the way he put it, by Vettel. He pitted before them with the 3 stops, and he made it to the second step of the podium, not by Ricciardo. So for him, he felt like he was unfairly treated by his team because it didn't choose the right strategy for the leader. He was the first in that race at that moment, so he felt cheated in a way, not by his team, but by the circumstances. And he was obviously happy for Max, but for him, it was deception that he wasn't on the podium and not even winning that race, because the opportunity was there. The car was fast enough. And if it wasn't for the puncture, he might have had even a shot of getting Vettel at that 3rd spot, or Kimi was too far, but maybe Sebastian. But because of that puncture and the timing of it. But Ricciardo, with the strategy, if it was adopted correctly, he might have been able to save his tire as well and might have been able to win that race. And we could have seen a Red Bull 1-2.
Yeah, we very well could have, because I think that the Ferrari just didn't quite have the pace of the Red Bull, but it'll be one of those things that we'll always kind of wonder about. But just sort of talking about race winners in general, in the last 10 Grand Prix in Spain, there have been 10 different winners. That is an interesting statistic in and of itself, because I don't think that you see that sort of thing, because you see how certain teams tend to dominate and do well at certain circuits, or when you see guys, especially how we've seen Nico Rosberg and obviously Lewis Hamilton over the last couple of years really dominate Formula One. That to see that real difference, that real mix of drivers going back and over 10 years is an interesting stat as well. So will it be a different driver in 2017? Who knows? But what's going to happen 2 weeks from now in Monaco? That's the next race that's coming up, and this season I think is really living up to be better than expected. I think that the racing, despite the dominance of Mercedes and Nico Rosberg through the first 2 months of the year, the racing everywhere else up and down the track has been first class.
No, absolutely. That's been very interesting. What caught my attention this year is the mix of old school drivers that we've been seeing in F1 for 15 years, the Button, the Alonsos, the Raikkonen, and younger drivers and drivers of 5 years, 6 years ago, Vettel to today. So it's almost like a dream team type of season this year. You're just missing Jean Alesi and Jacques Villeneuve making a comeback, and you got like 5 generation involved in that one. Alain Prost, who knows? But you know, what I'm saying is that's what caught my attention this year. On top of it, it's 21 races, the biggest races of all time. It's truly, if you don't count Africa as a continent, it's truly a global championship this year, touching almost every part of the globe. When you see that intro of the F1 with all the races connected to each other on the map, it takes a big space on the map. It's almost there.
It does.
Just missing one in Africa, because it really stands out where there's a big part of the map that the arrows don't go to. Anyways, that's my side rant. But it's like the greatest F1 championship ever. It's like the biggest world circuit of top of the table motorsport in the world. So it has that cachet, but it does have a lot of pressure. And I think that's the pressure that a Rosberg and a Hamilton feel, is the pressure of the scale of this season in itself. And yes, Rosberg, it's easy for him. And even though both of them are out, he's one race closer to the championship. Even though he didn't get 1 point, Lewis Hamilton either didn't get 1 point. So in a way, it's a win for Rosberg. So all that together, the fact that both of them are not going to be penalized on any point, even internally, because Toto said it's up to the commissaire, and if they decide that both should be cleared, both are going to be cleared. We think it's a racing incident. It looked like a racing incident, and to be honest, I believe it's a racing incident too, because of all the circumstances, the way that Rosberg was fiddling with his steering wheel in the same time that Hamilton was trying to pass him, all the circumstances involved. He was reacting too late. The space wasn't there. It was a risky overtake, and it happens. And both of them had that pressure of this huge season on them on that turn, because first of all, they don't like each other. And second of all, they want to be better than each other. So that happens, and it all exploded on this one decision by each of them. And it can all be explained by the amount of pressure and the scale of it all, because their car is so good that they're more than like the odds-on favorite to win. They're the expected winner. So if they don't win, it's what did you do wrong? And not like, wow, still great, you finished third. No. So that pressure mounts up a lot, and sometimes it happens in a one little turn that it all explodes.
Well, that's so very true, and it is really kind of strange to see two Mercedes parked on the side of the track. We rarely see a Mercedes not finish a Grand Prix. They do, of course, have mechanical problems from time to time, and don't make it the entire race length. But that is not always the case. But to see them take each other out like that, and I totally agree with you. It was a racing incident. Nico got his engine into the wrong mode, so he came out of that corner. I think he was somewhere between 15 to 20 kilometers an hour slower than Lewis Hamilton at one point, which doesn't seem like a lot. But when you're a Formula One car and everything happens in an instant, that's quite a bit. And I think that you had Nico that wasn't in the best position on the track. Lewis saw a little bit of an opening. He went for it. Nico made that one blocking move that he's allowed to make to protect the position. Lewis gets onto the grass, and he might as well be on ice. And then, unfortunately, he just collected his teammate thereafter. But it seems strange to replay that moment in my mind. And when you watch it and you see both the two Mercedes skid into the gravel trap, you can see Lewis Hamilton has his head in his hands before the car even gets to a stop. And then he takes that $50,000 steering wheel and throws it out of the cockpit. And
while Nico Rosberg takes his, put it gently on the seats, put everything back nicely together. It gives you wind into their mindset. But to be fair, both driver kept their helmet on for like 15 minutes after that, walking up until inside the motorhome before they took them off.
That's right. I think it would have been very interesting to be a fly on the wall in the Mercedes motorhome once the helmets came off and they sat down with Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda and had a little chat that probably went, "So boys, what happened out there?"
It apparently went like this. Lewis, what the F were you thinking? Running into me like this? And and Lewis would have answered back, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I know, I apologize. And that's apparently was the gist of it.
Really? That sounds very interesting.
That's a very layman's term and probably a lot less profanity that were said in that room. But apparently from the people in the know, from the behind the scenes, that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, they said even a couple of years ago when the two of them had the coming together on the opening lap at Spa-Francorchamps, when they touched and Nico actually punctured Lewis's tire, and then he had to crawl all the way to the back to the pits, which at Spa on the very first lap basically means that your afternoon is done because you've got to drive 5 miles all the way around or whatever it is at a fraction of the speed. Yeah.
2 minutes down.
Yeah, exactly. And they said at that point that they weren't, or Mercedes would terminate one of their contracts. They wouldn't keep one of them, or whatever the case was, that the drivers aren't bigger than the team. So they're both out of contract at the end of this year. So what do we see next year at Mercedes? Are we going to see Rosberg and Hamilton? Are we going to see Hamilton and somebody else, or Rosberg and someone else? There has been some rumor that perhaps Nico Rosberg is going to go to Ferrari and drive alongside Sebastian Vettel, and Vettel kind of laughed that one off because there was a rumor that he was flirting with Ferrari over a 2017 drive, and Seb said something to the effect of, well, as long as he's not flirting with me, then that's all good news. But and even Ferrari kind of played that one down, saying that it isn't a foregone conclusion that Kimi Räikkönen is going to be out of Ferrari at the end of the year. There's been a lot of speculation because he's getting up there. He's 36 years old now, that perhaps this would be his last year. But Maurizio Arrivabene said that it's basically Kimi's own decision what he wants to do with his futures, because they're very happy what they've been doing, or what he's been doing this year and last year as well, and obviously a P2 and some podiums this year. I mean, he's had a very good season to this point.
No, absolutely. But when you look at that, just to go back to Lewis and Nico right now, you mentioned the word speculation, and now we'll venture into a speculation, which is going to be based in the last month and a half of data that we know. Mark, 2 shows ago, you remember I mentioned, and it went really under the radar, but both number one of those teams, of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, were interchanged after Russia. Before Russia, sorry, in the week coming up to Russia. They were switched. And now this thing happened. Now, and we all know the relationship that Hamilton and Rosberg had over the years, it's been iffy at best. And both teams really had a individual aspect to it because of their driver. And they're trying to put a squash to that by switching number ones. But between you and me, there's something going on between those two drivers. There have been for long, and there probably forever will be. For the benefit of F1 and for everybody else, you need to have another good car of another team and put one of those two drivers in that car so they can actually have a battle on the track that we can see, and they can be allowed to battle each other for spots and not like we have now. No? Wouldn't it be great to have 2 different teams battling for the win? That's the utopian dream, no?
Yeah, I totally agree. And we haven't seen them really even fight with each other on the track. They obviously fight off the track quite a bit because the relationship between the two is frosty at the best of times. But this was going to be one of those situations where it looked like they were finally going to meet up head to head on the track. Lewis had the pole position again, and then Nico made that pass on him, and then it was over before it really started. But it would be interesting to see Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari, or Nico Rosberg in a Ferrari, or in a Red Bull, or whatever the case may be, against the other one that's driving in a Mercedes, and really see what it is. Because Mercedes, they seem to like that dominance that they've had over the last couple of years, not only just winning races, but dominating also the Constructors' Championships with these 1-2 finishes, or just maximizing the points. So it seems kind of a little bit counter to that sort of whole philosophy that they've had that they would maybe have like a rock star of a driver like a Nico Rosberg or a Lewis Hamilton, and then maybe a younger, maybe not so much of a proven driver that you maybe see in the other teams where you have a clear number one and then a number two driver that's maybe a lesser in talent or a very younger driver. So that would be interesting if they were to go that route.
If you go to the Max Verstappen story, there's a Carlos Sainz that's close to Verstappen that always been almost as fast, if not faster before, and now was close to Verstappen still this year. He finished 6th in Spain for Toro Rosso. Carlos Sainz, he's fast, and you put a decent car with him, he can win races. So there's that option too. If he doesn't get a spot with Red Bull next year, maybe he's going to be tired of always being in the second tier of that Red Bull family and want to have a great car. And yes, you mentioned Raikkonen. I wouldn't be surprised because even a McLaren Honda change of drivers for next year wouldn't surprise me too, because you have a lot of old drivers, and the way that Vettel has reacted this year to normal race instances. Even in Spain, he reacted on the radio crazy when somebody just did a normal overtake of him and was like, "Oh, what are we doing here again? Dude, just relax. You're racing and people are overtaking you because you don't have maybe the edge anymore." I don't know. Maybe that's that, but
he's probably a little bit more shell-shocked after the last couple of races and the run-ins that he's had with Danny Kvyat. But they even made that comment on the on the television broadcast that after Ricciardo tried to pass him and then he couldn't make that overtaking maneuver stick, and then you get like the radio of Sebastian Vettel just freaking out to a certain extent, like he did after Russia a couple of weeks ago. And I think it was Martin Brundle that said, just this is Grand Prix racing. Guys are going to try and pass. There was nothing wrong with the maneuver that he tried to make to try to get around you. He left his braking a little bit long. Yes, he got a little bit close to your car, probably maybe just a couple of inches looking at that one television angle. But
it was all controlled.
It was all controlled, and he didn't hit him, and he outbraked himself. He went to try and get that overtaking maneuver, and he left that braking just a fraction of a second longer than Sebastian Vettel. And if he made it stick, it would have been a great maneuver. And he didn't make it stick, and it was still a great maneuver because he didn't take out the car next to him.
Yeah, exactly. So for those reasons, I wouldn't be surprised if Ferrari goes for one younger driver, because you kind of need a driver to push the other driver. Look at how Ricciardo's been driving since Verstappen's been there. Even in the race, he was doing great. And look at Kvyat, even though he doesn't have the great car, he finished 10th and had the fastest lap in Spain.
Yes.
So there is a little revenge aspect to that lap for sure. You're like, see what I can do? I still can do fast lap even with this piece of crap that I'm driving now.
Well, that's right. And that was very interesting to see Danny Kvyat do that. I mean, it seems kind of cruel to say that he maybe was like one of the losers out of that whole. Well, I mean, he was the loser, obviously, going from the Red Bull, the main team to the B team. But I mean, he's still driving a Red Bull, be it a Red Bull with a Ferrari engine in it. But I think he did make a pretty good statement by coming out and getting a single point and setting the fastest lap in a car that he's not used to driving, just as much as you can make that comparison for Max Verstappen for winning the Grand Prix in a car that he's not maybe all that used to driving. But another one, like you also mentioned, was Carlos Sainz in P6. That was very impressive. I mean, there's a lot of these young guys doing a lot of really good things in Formula One, and it makes you wonder, like you were saying, who's going to be at McLaren next year, because I believe that Fernando Alonso has a contract for 2017. Jenson Button doesn't. So who comes in that second seat? Is he going to stick for another year in Formula One? Maybe. I would be surprised if Jenson Button came back for another year. I would think that most likely that they might give it to Stoffel van Dorn, the Belgian guy that's their reserve driver.
And you have Paul Di Resta and Williams too.
Yep.
That's the reserve driver that's probably as good as what Felipe Massa can still do. Maybe not as good as Bottas, because Bottas has maybe literally taken the best out of this car. But you still got great reserve drivers all across, and that's without counting the new drivers that are driving Formula GP2 or Formula E, or the sons of great drivers that are always coming up, because we always hear about them, like the Max Verstappen. But no, and just to go back to Max Verstappen, Mark, I want to make a quick comparison that was made on the Sky Sports F1. The only really other instance of a driver that switched team and won in their first race with the new team during a season is Juan Manuel Fangio, when he switched from Maserati to Mercedes and won with first race with Mercedes mid-season.
Wow, that's an interesting and
quite the company.
Yeah, exactly. And also that whole switch with switching Kvyat and Verstappen a couple of weeks ago, it made Helmut Marko and Christian Horner and Red Bull kind of look like the bad guys. But then when you see the result this past Sunday afternoon, it kind of makes it looks like an inspired move. But they were planning to give him some opportunity to drive for the big team at some point later this year. But with everything that had happened with Kvyat, I think they decided to move it up sooner. And it does look like a brilliant move at this point. Certainly, it's only one race, and who knows what's going to happen next week in Monaco. Last year, Verstappen crashed out in spectacular fashion at the very first corner. So, Monaco is a lottery at the best of times. You've seen all sorts of unexpected cars and drivers win there throughout its history. So,
1999 Olivier
Panis
won.
That's right, at the Ligier. Yeah, that's true. That's right. So I mean,
that's the epitome of this race of Monaco. You never know what can happen.
Well, I remember when I was very young that they had this one race. This is in the mid '80s. It was called on half points because the rain was so bad. And I think that Alain Prost won the race that day. But the one driver that was very, very upset that the race was called so early was an up-and-coming driver by the name of Ayrton Senna in a Lotus, who was carving through the pack like a butter through. I almost used the wrong comparison that was once made on a Vancouver Whitecaps broadcast. Butter through a hot knife should be the other way around. Anyways,
like a hot knife through butter.
Exactly. But it is a lottery, and we've seen some spectacular things happen over the years. But yeah, to go back to my original point, Max Verstappen has just as good of a chance to win that race as does any one of the other drivers, because you never know what's going to happen.
No, Monaco fascinates me for this because, I always I have a love-hate relationship with Monaco. And this because I've always been a fan of driving racing game. And Monaco's always the worst driving racing game to play with because it's not drivable. You can't go fast. You always bang into the wall. I always break my suspension, and I'm done after 2 laps. So I cannot wrap my mind around F1 cars driving as fast as they can in those narrow streets with guards that if you touch them a little too much, your day's over, especially with the tires they have in 2016 that are unreliable at best. You touch the guardrail, you're done. So, damn, it's going to be very interesting next weekend.
It is for sure.
Well, 2 weekends from now, sorry.
2 weekends from now, yeah, that's right. But it is it's fascinating because when you watch the in-car cameras and you see the speeds that these cars are going, and you see how narrow the roads are and just how close that the barriers are, and how they literally thread the needles through the corners and the chicanes around these different parts of the of the city, and how you go up and down the hill and around by the casino and all these landmarks of this iconic circuit. It truly is a spectacular circuit. I mean, it's obviously very technical, and it's a fantastic track, and there's always something unexpected happening at Monaco.
I know, and I have a prediction for Monaco, and it's based on a couple of observations I have from Spain, Mark. One thing, Williams did a pit stop that the threshold wasn't marked, but he was either flush on 2 or 1.99 seconds.
My goodness.
This is becoming crazy, and Williams is becoming the most efficient car we know, but team all around. And this compared to, not compared, but this in addition with the driving of a Valtteri Bottas that's been clockwise and very efficient, getting the most out of the car, those are the type of attribute you need to be able to be good at Monaco, because the engine is important, but you never really use it 100%. You need to have a efficient engine. So if your car is efficient and accelerates properly, and on top of this, you have the fastest pit stop in history, well, it gives you a good shot of winning in Monaco.
Definitely. And especially on a track like that, where that's the time advantage that you have on the next guy that's behind you or in front of you on the track is crucial. We saw that last year in Monaco when you had the different strategies between the two Mercedes cars, and how Lewis Hamilton came out on the wrong end of that. And the team actually apologized to him afterwards, saying that they blew it and he came in, they just got his pit stop all wrong, and while he was getting his tires changed, Nico Rosberg screamed past, and that was it. So that is definitely a big advantage to have on a track like that. And if you can get an ultra fast pit stop, I mean, it almost seems kind of funny to say that a guy that's taking a pit stop that takes 2.75 seconds is a total loser compared to the guy that's down at 2.25 or 2 seconds is amazing, because I mean, even under 3 seconds, I mean, it barely seems like enough time to actually drive into the pit lanes, drive into the pit box, stop the car, and then you're off again. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
It takes way more time to get there than to actually do the job, because it's all about tires now, because fuel is all calculated and you have the exact amount before you leave to make it to the end, you know, all those things. So it's just a tire situation, and they have like 3 guys per tire with like Williams now have a one quicker and fastest type of bolt system to actually screw the tire on the car. So that's all they do. Imagine your job is to fasten that bolt every day. You practice for like 5 hours just for that one time. When you do it, it's second nature.
Yeah. And even if your guy wins, you're still the one guy that'll never get up onto the podium. So it's almost like an unremembered job, but one that's so very crucial, isn't it?
Yeah, they get paid decently too.
They get paid decently, and they get to travel all over the world. So there definitely are some fringe benefits. All right, Kevin, what else do we have for this evening?
I do have a rant that's been brewing for the last couple of weeks, Mark.
Okay, well, rant on it.
Well, you know, watching those cars in 2016 in F1, the tracks are amazing, and the stands now are great, and the circus is a circus. But the cars are so blah now. They're so plain. They're so nondescript. They're so boring. The Ferrari car doesn't look like a Ferrari car. It's not the right red. There's too much white. McLaren is black and red. What's that? Renault is all yellow. What? No. You need blue in there. You need a little bit more white. Come on. You need to make it nicer. Whereas Flavio Briatore would not agree with that Renault, you know? So, Manor, just yellow and blue. Nothing else, barely any sponsors, nothing. Come on, Mercedes, just silver. You don't see nothing else. You just see chrome pass by. Yeah, it looks cool, but I need more identity. I need more differences. I need a better red on a Ferrari. That would be a Ferrari red. Ugh, it's driving me crazy watching those races. It's awesome. The action is amazing. But the actual colors used on the painting are off. It should be way more nice than it is.
Yeah, especially those McLarens. They're completely black with a hint of orange, those orange flashes on the radiators and then different parts on the cars. And they just don't look like McLaren. I think that we all got used to them over the years when they had the partnership with the Mercedes, and they had the black and the silver and the West cigarette advertising. Obviously, that's out in modern Formula One, but you could tell a McLaren a mile away, and now you can still tell a McLaren a mile away because it's just this big black blur.
But it's not just them, Mark. It's all the cars. I literally, when I was watching it this weekend again, I was like, wow, I can't believe the only nice car out there is like Williams.
Yes, with
they
the Martini
took a risk.
Car. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have a design, even if it's not the Martini logo. Even last year, they have that design. They have that blue stripe in the middle that gives an identity to the car itself. That's different to the other ones. The other one is just color put on a car. Come on, have a designer come up with something. It used to be overthought what the car would represent, what it looks like, the design. Now it's just, all right, what paint do we have left? All right, put this there, and it'll be all fine. I'll be fine. Come on. It used to be more creativity. Now I'm bored. And I look at the cars. I'm like, they even look like something special, especially Ferrari. There's way too more white. It's not the right red. It should be a little bit more redder, if that's the word, or more, I don't know, it's missing something.
Yeah.
I know you can't put Marlboro in, that's fine, but there's missing something in that Ferrari car, and there's a lot of other cars, example, in this. They're all like missing something. You're looking at the Williams is the only one that I look at it, I'm like, all right, it's been designed, it's been thought of. It looks like an old school race stripe type of car with the feel, with the martini. It looks awesome. It looks like a car that would race the 24 hours of Le Mans next week. I need more of those.
The other problem they have too is that not all of the cars have recognizable numbers on them. Though the one thing that the McLaren do have is a nice big number on the nose that you can tell. But usually you end up resorting to looking at the driver's helmet. The problem is that sometimes on television, and even though everything is high definition in the year 2016, that sometimes these guys have similar looking helmets. And sometimes when you're looking back and forth, especially when I'm referring to my phone, I'm looking at the live timing, you sometimes look at a moment and you miss, and it's kind of like, well, which car did I just look at, or which driver was it? And it's even tougher in real life. I mean, we have it a lot easier when we're sitting in the comfort of our living rooms watching a Grand Prix and having the benefit to actually stop the race and pause it and take a look up close. But it would be a lot nicer if they have these big numbers somewhere on the car to tell who's who. I mean, especially nowadays when they have the personalized numbers, like Nico Rosberg's number 6, Lewis Hamilton's number 44, Sebastian Vettel number 5. Just put it somewhere, because it's not always easy to identify from the helmets, especially when you get a very brief look at it on the television screen.
Yeah, and to finish the subject on this, if you're looking at, because the other car I really like outside of Williams is the Haas one, because it's
Yes.
different. You have the logo of Haas, and it feels like a Haas car. It feels like not a template. It feels itself. And the fact that it's written the team name on the car, I like. You know what would be fun? If there's a lot of sponsors and there's a lot of space left on cars now, even though there's a lot of sponsors, there's still some space left. Why not write the team name that's visible on the car? So when you watch the Williams, you see written Williams somewhere. And when you watch Ferrari, you see the Ferrari and the logo Ferrari on it. That little touch of details will go a long way, I think.
It kind of be like the Red Bull model. They're already one kind of step away, or one step up on the curve, already having their logo and their name right on the car
Why not
itself.
go back to this? Like, it's a circle, I know, but we went so far in the ad and the marketing and the commercials on the car that just maybe a step back of a McLaren with on the back wing said McLaren.
Yeah.
And a Ferrari that has red and the Ferrari yellow logo with the horse on it.
Yeah.
And the Williams would be written Williams, And the Renault would actually, it is written Renault, fine, it's fine, but it would be not just yellow, please. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that could be done that would tickle my fancy.
And we're available for hire if anybody wants to get us in to help consult on this one.
Absolutely. Sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com. Let me know. I would gladly design the cars for you.
Very good. Well, I think that's a very good spot to leave the show for this week. You've been listening to episode number 7 of the Scuderia F1 podcast, where we're always up to speed on Formula One racing. Anyways, Kevin, before we go, let everybody know where they can find you online.
You can follow me on Twitter at KevLaramee. That's at KEVLARAMEE, and find all the shows of the network at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Very cool. And of course, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Scuderia F1 Pod. And if you want to email us or send us a comment on the show, you can email us at scuderiaf1pod@gmail.com. That's a wrap. We'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.